we're all realizing very quickly that the old way of thinking and investing, going through a financial advisor, may not necessarily have the best interest in their heart for what you and your family need. People are so diverse, every single, like a snowflake, like a thumbprint, everyone is different and they've got different wants and needs and desires for their family, for tax shelter, for income purposes, for giving back, for charitable donations, for leaving a legacy. All these things matter, and having the right team and the knowledge to go out and seek it and ask the right questions. Today on the show, I have the pleasure of speaking with Eunicia Peret. Eunicia is an accomplished wealth strategist and business owner with over 15 years experience in the financial services industry. Now, Eunicia has honed her expertise by delivering significant financial improvements to the bottom line of Fortune 500 companies and renowned global brands across multiple different industries. I'm really excited to have her on the show. Enough out of me. Let's get her out here. G'day, Eunicia. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
It's such a pleasure to be here, Reed. I'm doing amazing.
Let's rewind the clock. You also have a bit of an accent. And can you tell me how you made your first ever dollar as a kid?
My first ever dollar as a kid, it was actually in Romanian lei. I was born in Romania. And my story has a little bit of nuance. I realized there was kind of a problem specifically when it came to sweets and candy. My father was in the United States at the time. We were in Romania with my mom, my sister, and I. And let's just put it this way. Back then, the same type of products that we find here on the shelves in the United States could not be found in Europe, and certainly not in Romania. And so children seeing me eating the candy that my father would send over and the gum and all of that, they were not just salivating because I would share with them, but I couldn't share everything. And so what I realized was that they had a problem and I could fix it. And my way of fixing it was, listen, I really did not need that much candy or that much gum. And so when I realized that there was a market for selling candy and gum, I was able to convert some of to reattribute or realign some of the, especially the gum, it sold better than the candy, and selling it to my friends. So that was my first interaction with making money.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell me about the coming to America story. Clearly, you just mentioned you had your father who was already living in the US. When did you follow, and when did you come?
Yeah, it's interesting that you ask those questions, because those are questions that's a story I don't really talk often about. My father came to visit my mom's brother, decided to stay. They convinced him to stay. He filed for all the paperwork and everything else, and it took several years before all of that was finalized. During time during which he could not leave the States, and so we were on one continent, he was on another, and you can imagine this is during a time when Zoom was not a thing. Video calling in general was not a thing. So we would, speak on the phone and interact, and my parents just did an amazing job of not only keeping that relationship alive, but keeping the love alive as well, which when we were reunited, foreshadowing 7 years later, which was a long time, yes, the time had lapsed, but because our relationship was so tight, it felt as if it had just been a few days prior that I had last seen my father. And so that experience, of course, shaped who I am today, shaped the hard work through the experience with me cleaning the house and kind of figuring out what are some of the things that that need to get done. What is that resilience? How do we get past the no's and past the, sometimes people putting us down? I saw a lot of that in what my parents were dealing with, because they were being put down by others, specifically, due to the fact that they were separated, not because they wanted to, but because of the situation. And it helped me appreciate not only individuals that truly have a heart and people that you can trust, but it also helped me understand, how do you differentiate between people that are looking at what's in it for them and people that are truly there because they want to be close, because they want to add value, and because they just are. And so it really helped shape me as an individual, and furthermore now as, of course, a business owner.
That would be tough. What ages were that 7 years before, like, you had it away from your father?
I was 7 when my father came to the States.
Yeah, right. So 7 to 14, very formidable
7
years.
7 to 14.
Yeah,
Yes.
You're going through a lot of puberty. You're going through a lot of, just understanding the world. Talk to me about that transition coming as a 14-year-old, not seeing your father, and then coming to the United States, right? That would have been a pretty big, not even learning curve, but a bit of a smack in the face.
It was a smack in the face from a cultural perspective. I joke around with my kids. We actually ended up putting our children in Montessori early on because we wanted to make sure that should we decide to ever go back, or even just for a temporary assignment or a role for a few years in Europe, that we wanted them to be on pace from a study perspective, specifically when it comes to academia. From an academic perspective, I was very advanced back in Romania. I was doing math Olympiads, Romanian Olympiads, English, and the like. And when I came here, what I realized was that back home, I had taken 4 years of physics as an example and 3 years of chemistry, starting in fifth and sixth grade, respectively. And when I came here, I had a whopping 1 year of physics and a whopping 1 year of chemistry. So you can imagine the boredom. That was probably one of my biggest struggles. Is the cultural impact. The first 6 months were the most brutal. After the first 6 months, I felt that I was almost numb. I knew that going back was not going to happen. And I realized that I just had to had to integrate. And so I integrated, but because I was so advanced from an educational perspective, I was bored at school. And what I found, and even those were very formative years, because what I found was that there were programs I didn't know, my parents didn't know, and people that knew never shared. There were programs that could have helped me excel. My career counselor at school, even though she knew that I was exceptional, I ended up graduating number 5 in a class of almost 700 students. And I didn't know how high up I was because, frankly, part of me didn't care. And nobody set me down to say, hey, we've got somebody that has huge potential on our hands. And because that didn't happen, it put me in a situation where, hindsight 2020, I probably could have done things very differently. I don't regret it because I wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for my story. But what I'm seeing is that it's some of the same patterns with the clients that we work with today from a financial perspective, right? There are individuals that know more in financial services. Maybe they know more, maybe they don't. But even those that know more sometimes will not say much because if they do, it's money out of their pocket. And our philosophy is it's not about money in our pocket. It's about what's happening with the money in the client's pocket. So if I could think back to those years in high school, where would I be? And what would my current position look like? I wouldn't have been as bored, and I would have put that time to better use because I had the right mentors, the right support to help me propel forward. So I use that as fuel to say, you know what, if there are better solutions, if there are better strategies, people deserve to know. And that's what we deliver to our clients at Excelstra.
That's a very good segue into the financial services. So what was the tipping point, I should say, of wanting to get into the financial services industry and being an entrepreneur and starting businesses on your own and now helping others, reduce their tax burden or increase their wealth or keep more of their money? Why that path?
Well, that's a great question. And really the answer is very simple. I had always been in the financial service. My college career was in finance with a heavy emphasis on international business and marketing as well. And I ended up doing a large part of my career, my gift to the world, the early part of my career in strategy consulting. And that in itself, that was also focused on the financial side. My area of expertise was the office of the CFO. So I work with a lot of CFOs, CEOs of very large companies, many of which, if we spoke them out loud, you would know who they are. It helped me understand what's happening with those massive organizations, what's happening with Fortune 500 companies when it comes to doing more with less, keeping more of the revenues that were coming in. But then consequently, years later, what my husband and I realized, because we absolutely love real estate, was that we were young, making a lot of money, investing our money in real estate, and asking financial advisors for support. Now, for anybody that understands real estate and what I just said, they will understand that the financial advisors probably didn't want to do a whole lot with us because we were making money investing in a real estate. And as a result, there was not a whole lot of money to invest on the assets under management side. And so we were getting guidance. But when I look back in retrospect, when I started asking questions as to why in the world am I paying so much in taxes? Yes, my husband had a business which was helping us offset some of that income, but the reality is we could have done so much more. And so when I realized that we could have done so much more and that we had lost years of, frankly, overpayment in taxes based on the way that our life and our business, or my husband's businesses were structured, I realized that we had to do something about it. So of course we changed the dynamic for us. And When I started working with individuals, my husband had a lot of clients that were asking him, "Hey, can you help us on the financial side?" Well, his area of expertise is real estate, not so much the investment side, or how do we establish our legacy through the broader wealth lenses. I said, you got to be able to help these guys, these gals, right? The same way that we needed the help. And he said, I don't have the time. And as you know, it took us so many people and so many trials and tribulations until we got to someone that at least understood that we have a bigger vision and that we need customized support. And then what you did is you took that and you made it into your own thing. He said, how do you think I could possibly do that for my clients? So I said, I tell you what, after his advisement, I was going through some major decisions that I needed to make with my career. He said, here's what I would recommend if you do. Take a 6-month hiatus. Just take a 6-month sabbatical, also known as sabbatical in the industry. Like, help me with this thing, put this thing together, just practice together, and then you can go to your corporate life. Well, when I realized the big issues, remember I was telling you the issue that kids had in Romania? Import-export of candy and gum and Wrigley's was not on the shelves. So they had a problem. We had to fix it. In this case, what I realized was that individuals have the same problems like we did. They're paying too much in taxes. They don't understand if they want to invest in real estate. Why don't we incentivize them? Why don't we give them the platforms to do that versus, and my husband's not on the investment sides, by the way, but when clients come and they'll say, hey, I want to look into a syndicate, or I want to invest in buying homes, or whatever the situation may be, we got to be able to say yes. And here are some of the resources that you can consider and bring those resources to bear versus telling them, oh, you know what? Real estate's great, but let's look at REITs. Well, that's wonderful, but the client might just resonate with hard assets. So who is anybody in the financial services industry to try to divert them towards something else just because that's not what their specific area of expertise is? So realizing those problems, I was able to make the transition from being able to think and solve big problems for Fortune 500 companies and bringing a lot of those, not just the strategies, but the ability to think outside of the box to our clients for the last many years at this point in time.
You say a lot of things there, and I think, so we own a real estate investment firm, RSM Property Group. We bring on a lot of investors. We're a syndication platform, private equity platform, and a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned about people trying to access information, and in this world that has now shifted away from the financial advisor to being this podcast, books, access to information is so key and critical that makes you smarter. And gone are the days where you can blindly give a financial advisor or a stockbroker money and hope that they got your best interest at heart. They don't. And so increasing your financial IQ, being the one who is knowledgeable about an industry because of certain tax benefits or because of certain things that resonate with you and your income stream and your family and your legacy that you want to leave is so important. And getting access to that is even more important, right? And finding the right people. And that's why we have these podcasts, and that's why we do this each and every week. But services like yourself are out there as well, telling the average Joe who may not necessarily know about a syndication, may not necessarily know about what's cost segregation, what's bonus depreciation, what are all these things that we talk about in our decks for our investors that they know, but that's only a small segment of the industry, right? There's a lot of people out there who got no idea about how to offset their income. So I do like to get. I'm a numbers guy. My background's in structural engineering, so I do love getting into the numbers. You loosely mentioned real estate. I just mentioned cost segregation and bonus depreciation. Are they some of the strategies you employ and do and offer? I know you have a wealth strategy as well. I'd love to get into that. But are there anything else high level besides just physical assets that you do? Because that's just one segment of wealth preservation, wealth growth. Or is it purely just centered around real estate investing and hard assets?
No. Actually, as a matter of fact, I want everybody to know that you and I are not in competition at all. As a matter of fact, I want to learn more about what you guys do, because there are individuals that ask us, hey, like, we want to do these things, right? We want to get into syndication. Who do we trust? Right. So where we play a role, Reed, is we play a role for our clients in making sure that at the end of the day, their financial team, if it's in existence, they're playing nice together, and that the client actually has access to understanding. That's a big thing, understanding what their options are. So if they say, hey, I want to invest in real estate. Okay, what kind of real estate do you want to invest in? because we've all heard the stories. And I can tell you the myriad of stories where clients came to us and real estate deals had gone really wrong, meaning instead of at least getting their money out, they lost 50% or more. And so we had nothing to do with those deals, but we were caught in the middle of how do you help a client navigate through that when they just got taken to the woodshed? And if they do like real estate, how do we make sure that they don't write it off because they had an awful experience with someone? So our job is to make sure that not only do we collaborate with our client's broader financial team, but oftentimes what we're finding is that when we start working together, that a lot of individuals are realizing that, hey, these are things I should have known 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Why didn't my financial team talk about this?
Right.
And so at that point in time, it becomes the question of, do they have the right people on the bus? And so our job is not to displace their financial team, but what we're finding is that because financial advisors, the financial industry in general, it fits more of a mold and a cookie cutter approach. Individuals nobody should be put in a cookie cutter model or a mold. Unfortunately, that's where everybody else is. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that they can step outside of that mold, and they need the support. They need the strategies. They need the support on the implementation side. They need the mindset. Our strategies come in from a dollars and cents. And you were talking about numbers, right? Just yesterday, I was reading an article. It was a financial article that was talking about how last year, over 50% of individuals either heavily contemplated, or they made a shift from their financial advisor.
Yep.
And so they're going away. People are going away because they're realizing that they don't have the knowledge and they need to be equipped. I tell clients, I don't need you to do what we're talking about. We have experts that do that, right? There are specific things that I won't even do because that's not my unique area of expertise. But we have to know about them in order for those strategies to be effective and to be executed against appropriately. And that's where we come in, making sure that we coordinate the process so that the balls don't get dropped.
Let's talk about your wealth freedom formula. What is it, and how can people understand it a little bit better when they're trying to implement it, or even thinking about maybe moving away from their financial advisor and becoming more independent and understanding what tools and tricks are out there for them today that are easily accessible at their fingertips?
I love that. So the wealth freedom formula is our methodology that our clients go through. And the reason we put this methodology in place, and it was something that morphed and grew and expanded over a period of several years in working with hundreds of clients, which then helped us continue to shape it and refine it. It gives individuals an opportunity to start think about their money, right? And oftentimes clients will come to us and they'll say, Eunicia, what is it that you guys recommend? So I look at them and I'll say, what I or anybody on the team I recommend is almost irrelevant to your situation. Because what I like, you may not like. What I like, one of our partners may not like. What they like, I may not resonate with. It's something that keeps me up at night. Risk at the market, for example, right? I just don't enjoy it. But does that mean that clients should not be invested in the market? No. But if they want to be invested in the market, they need to understand what are their options and how do we make sure that the best people that's all they do, that's all they like to do, are in the driver's seat of what's happening with the money. That's, again, we're just talking about the market. We're not even talking about real estate. We're not talking about taxes. We're not talking about anything else. And so the wealth freedom formula is designed to help an individual and help our conversation in terms of the goals. And it's not just, high loosey-goosey because we have to do them and get the box, but deeply down, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What's going to happen in 15, 20, 30 years from now in order for us to work backwards? Then we kind of peel back the onion and we start thinking about what is it that we need this money to do. I was just talking to someone earlier today and I said, if we had $1 or $1 million or 100,000, whatever the number is, right? If we just had $1, do we want the strategies where the $1 will equal $1 for something in the future? Or do we want that $1 to equal more and buy us more and address more problems or maybe more solutions? Well, I want that. Okay. So then we start talking as we're going through that and we're identifying what do we want our money to do, the client's money to do. Then we say, okay, that's wonderful. Now that we know what we need the money to do and what are the different categories that we need it to be in, how do we think about growth? And this is a very, very critical one because everybody kind of thinks about what they've already always known and what they hear everybody else talk about, but they don't know how that resonates to them, with them. So we talk about the growth opportunities. We'll talk about risk. We talk about, what happens when. What are you going to do if your money loses 50% overnight? It will rebound. We'll know that it most likely will rebound. But what will that do to you personally, to your life, to your family, to your spouse? Because we know that money is such a big issue for families, right? And relationships. And then we also talk about taxes. And taxes, we approach taxes from two very distinct angles. The Wealth Freedom Formula specifically looks at how do we minimize taxes in the future? Because we know that taxes are not going to come down. Most likely they're going to be going up and significantly. And then the other component that comes up is this is especially relevant to investors, business owners, successful individuals that are dealing with a big tax issue today, is we then also focus on, okay, what's happening with the taxes today? Because the industry as a whole, financial services industry, most of what they talk about is let's minimize your tax exposure in the future. Well, that's great. But if somebody's bringing in $1 million, $2 million, $20 million, $30 million or more, minimizing taxes today. I'll give you a perfect example. I just got off the phone with an investor group, and they have several doctors that are exiting their practices. They're actually selling their practices to a PE group. They already have the letter of intent. They're looking to close probably within the next month and a half. And my question was, have you guys thought of any strategies to help minimize the tax exposure? And the answer was a resounding no. Well, guess what? There are specific things that can be done, but some of those strategies actually need to be implemented even before that letter of intent is issued. So you can see how there is a really big problem. And we're talking about millions and tens of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the kind of stuff that we do as part of the Wealth Freedom Formula, which is designed to really walk the client through the steps that by the time we're done with the Wealth Freedom Formula, they know what are the things that they're going to resonate with. And so we're able to then identify what I call the domino effect. And people just go gaga over to my domino effect, right? What is the one or two things? What are the one or two things that we can do today to make not only our future better from a financial perspective, building wealth and things like that, but also being able to rest at night? Because what good is it to us if we're invested and we make money hand over fist, but we can't enjoy it because we're afraid, because we don't understand, because we're constantly paranoid that people are taking advantage of us, which, by the way, does happen. We don't want that. We want to live in peace, make money, build wealth, leave a legacy, and at the same time, enjoy life.
That example you gave of those doctors, we actually, part of the strategies obviously is a big one in real estate, is 1031 exchange, moving that forward. But as a personal investor, I'm a GP, right? GPs don't necessarily get to do 1031 exchanges because of the way the entity structure is formed. So there's different ways you can do, and I'm not the CPA, but there's drop and swaps, but they have to be done in a certain timely manner prior to even thinking about selling a deal, right? So it's actually on our side of the coin, when we set up our deals, it's the entity structure on the front end. When you buy the deal, helps us execute on not only the LP side, but on the GP side in the future. And there's other ways that you can, the dirty man's 1031 exchange, we've talked about a lot about on the show. There's different ways you can avoid it if you happen to be a GP, but as an LP, it's also knowing going into a deal, is the entity structure set up in a way that will allow you to preserve your wealth that is created over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. It's actually on the front end, you really want to be doing that. And if you've got to change along the way, you can, but understand what does that mean for the entity, for the structure, legal consequences, obviously tax consequences. So it's having that well-rounded knowledge, not when you're in LOI state, but more back when you start a business or a partnership or an investment or whatever that might be. It has to happen from day one. So having people on your side.
On the real estate side is beautiful because the 1031 exchanges are, again, even there, obviously there are strategies and you have to plan that accordingly. But there are, when we're stepping outside of the real estate realm, it becomes even more complex because it's not as easy. The same deals, it's not a 1-for-1, right? So the 1031 exchanges, they don't apply the same way. And so what we see happening is there are other strategies that can come into play that sometimes can look similar, but they're very different. Here's the deal. They're not exactly out there on Google. You can't just go and say, I'm selling my business. What should I do? If you do, chances are you're probably going to run into some trouble, right? And so a lot of it you were mentioning about the risk, the liability and all of that is You also don't want to go into situations where you're creating risk because you're saying, DRS, please come look at me. A lot of people, there are a lot of shady deals out there. And what people don't understand is that, yes, you might save today, but is this going to cost you on the back end? And so, anytime we talk about tax strategies and such, is they're aligned first and foremost that has to be a business need before some of those strategies would come into play, which then provide a huge tax benefit. But without there being that business case, we're just opening up Pandora's box to all sorts of issues. And I don't want that for clients. I don't want that for people, because I've seen people that went through through those hurdles, and it's not pretty. And so our job is to make sure that we provide the right support and the right access to the right experts in order to make sure that we make that happen.
Yeah, the business selling of businesses is a completely different unknown world to me. I'm in the real estate sector, and as they say, the 1031 exchange is not a tax avoidance, it's a tax deferral, right? And you need to know that. It's a hamster wheel that you will be on until you want to exit and take your profits. And at that point, Uncle Sam will be there. But there's ways in which you can reduce it, but it is also not just like this golden chalice of like, oh, 1031 exchanges is going to be great forever. It's like, no, well, you've got to be on that hamster wheel forever unless you want to start taking certain ways in which you can go and then get access to that cash by doing certain other things. And I'm not the expert here, you are. And
that's where diversification of even strategies is so critical. Oftentimes, individuals will say, well, do we do the same exact thing year over year? It's like, no, no, if we did, our job would be so easy. But we're constantly out there saying, okay, if last year we did A, B, and C, or maybe A and B, or maybe just A, does that strategy still apply this year? Let's make sure that it does. If it does, wonderful. If it doesn't, then what do we replace it with? Or maybe what do we add to the mix in order to continue to minimize, again, that risk, but also make sure that we build in that diversification, because, the money in most cases is going to convert on the other end. And then, we need to make sure that something happens with that for it to be put to work. What does that look like? And it comes right back to, some of the investment strategies, many of which can be either, again, in the market, non-traditional financial products, or outside of the market altogether, be it real estate, be it other things as well.
Yeah. No, and I think the big thing here is that there's a massive shift in the way people approach it. And that is more to do with, I believe personally, the Jobs Act that changed in 2012 that allowed investors to invest directly into operators and thus taking control of their financial future and not just going through the cookie cutter, as you mentioned before. You have to do this. You have to buy this annuity. You have to buy this stock or whatever, because that's what we've been told. And these other things, like real estate, are alternative assets, right? But there's so many tax benefits along the way. And I'll just, back to real estate, because we're an expert in it. Most Western civilizations have a tax code. Their government is not in the business of owning real estate. And it behooves you, the tax code is actually there to write you tax benefits for owning real estate. Now, this is just one segment of the tax code, but just understand that, right? And so when you start to think about alternative, it's not as alternative as you think, because the tax code is written for home ownership, for people to invest money into housing, into real estate, because the government is not in that business. And when you start to change your mindset about that, then all of a sudden all these things start opening up and you're like, wow, okay, I'm now approaching it not from the scary IRS. It's more like, what else can we do?
Absolutely. The IRS, I tell clients all the time, the IRS is not the enemy. The enemy is, frankly,
not knowing.
It's not knowing. And it's an industry, just even from a tax perspective, the tax preparers, their job is not to know the tax code in the minute level of detail in terms of how do you use the tax code to your advantage. Their job is to understand what is it that the clients can do based on just the summary level, what everybody else is dealing with. But when we're getting into the individuals that are bringing in that higher level income, that's where we bypass, or we exceed the knowledge that unfortunately everybody else is equipped with. And we need to be looking at, okay, how do we think creatively and outside of the box? And by the way, it applies to people that don't necessarily make millions of dollars,
right?
But oftentimes that mindset keeps us back. I mean, I know so many people that are like, well, I can't afford to work with an expert, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, they'll come to us and they'll say, can you refer me to a CPA? It's like, yes, we can. But we don't just give our resources away. These are people that are doing an amazing job the experts that we work with, they're there for clients because they want more. So if you're just looking for the free and for the next, then I'm sure you guys are the same, right? It's like, okay, you work with investors that are serious and are wanting to put the effort into that collaboration and into the work that you guys do with them because they know that there are going to be benefits. And if they don't want that, then maybe they're not the right client.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, Eunicia, at the end of every show, we like to dive into the top 5 investing tips. You ready to get into it?
Sure, let's do it.
Question number 1 is, what's the daily habit you practice to keep on track towards your goals?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm constantly refining to make sure that we find synergies. I find synergies for myself. One of my latest and my most favorite was and is still is to journal. And I coupled the journaling with prepping the next day, just making sure that everything, like all the to-dos, my mind keeps a lot of information. And what I found is that by just putting it down the night before, I know that it's there, it's not going to disappear, and I can actually rest better. So that's been a huge thing for me.
You and I are cut from the same cloth because I literally can't. On a Sunday, I get Sunday scaries if I don't write my week down. It's already in my phone, it's already on my calendar, but the art of writing it, the act, I should say, of writing it down, it's like it's in the book. It's in the book. It's in the book.
It's in the book.
You can go to sleep.
Yes, you can go to sleep. And I also just from even the journaling, what I found is that time to just sometimes talk to yourself just brings forth so many like eye-opening ideas, frankly, so on a personal and business side, etc., to the point where even when I'm super tired, I will literally force myself to spend at least a few minutes to just dump some ideas on there. And that's been amazing.
Question number 2 is, who's been the most influential person in your career to date?
By far, my husband. I would not be where I'm at. I would not be positioned the way that I am. I would not be as successful as I am if he didn't believe more in me as a business owner before I ever learned that I could pay myself.
Yep, that's awesome.
And I know that's a mouthful.
Question number 3 is, what is the most influential tool in your business? Now, might have already mentioned it might be the journal, but it could be physical like a journal, or it could be a piece of software that you just can't run the business without. What is it?
My calendar. It's similar to the journal. It's similar to my planner, except I don't. Things are moving. Multiple people have access to my calendar, so because of that, I can't just put it in a planner and it'll be fine even for a day. That's just the most used tool for me. I live by my calendar to the point where even personal time is in there, and everybody in my family knows that, sweetheart, if it's not in the calendar, how can I help? So they make sure that time is scheduled.
Yeah. Question number 4. In one sentence, what has been the biggest failure that you experienced in your career, and what did you learn from that failure? Not
giving myself grace earlier on to realize that failures are not failures. They're just there to actually help us get to our higher self, to the next level. Yeah, I love it. Last question, Eunicia, is where can people reach you to continue the conversation? They want to be in your sphere. They want to find out a little bit more about what you do. Where do they go? The easiest way is to go to podcast.excelstra.com. That's an easy place, or just excelstra.com. It's excelstra.com. Or on social media, you can find me under Eunicia Peret. If you have any questions, any ideas, you just want to either pick our brain or you want to possibly look like at what collaboration could look like, just find us and get in touch with us. Love it. Love it. And it was podcast.excelstra, so EXCELSTRA.com, right? Yes, .com. ExcelStra.com. Good stuff. Well, Eunicia, I want to thank you so much for coming on today's show. I just want to reflect some of the things that I took away from today's show. I think the biggest thing is that we're all realizing very quickly that the old way of thinking and investing, going through a financial advisor, going through Uncle Joe's financial advisor, may not necessarily have the best interest in their heart for what you and your family need. And your analogy around cookie cutters, that everyone needs to be in these cookie cutters, is so mundane at this point, right? People are so diverse. Every single, like a snowflake, like a thumbprint, everyone is different, and they've got different wants and needs and desires for their family, for tax shelter, for income purposes, for giving back, for charitable donations, for leaving a legacy. All these things matter, and having the right team and the knowledge to go out and seek it and ask the right questions, because sometimes we are inhibited from moving forward by not asking the right question.
but that's because we're not being given the right information. So everyone who's listening to the show already knows that you're already on the right path because you're listening to podcasts, you're educating yourself each and every day about what you need to do to better your financial IQ. So Eunicia, did I leave anything out of that little summary?
No, I think you did an amazing job with the summary. The only thing that I might add is, as you're listening to this show, just realize that podcasts are phenomenal. Workshops are phenomenal. But if you want to get to the next level, you're probably going to have to invest in working with someone that can take you to the next level. I've not yet found anybody that's going to give away all of their secrets just because, and not because they don't want to or they're not well-intentioned, but oftentimes those secrets and that secret sauce also carries a lot of work that they do behind the scenes. So if you do want to take it to the next level, you're probably going to have to find somebody to work with.
Love it. Well, Eunicia, thank you so much for jumping on today's show. Enjoy the rest of your week and we'll catch up very, very soon.
Looking forward to it.
Well, there you have another cracking episode jam-packed with incredible advice from Eunicia. Remember, head over to podcast.excelstra.com. That's EXCELSTRA.com. Check out everything Eunicia and her husband are doing out over there in the Wealth Freedom Formula. I want to thank you all again for taking some time out of your day to tune in to continue to grow your financial IQ. It's what we're all about here on this show. The easy way to get back to this show is to give it a 5-star review on iTunes. If you're interested in investing with us, head over to rsnpropertygroup.com. And we're going to do this all again next week. So remember, be bold, be brave, and go give life a crack.